Hello, I am Big Italy 42 here once again with the Cafe on Air podcast. I'm going to be checking out the salaries here on FanDuel. For this podcast, I already have a DraftKings one up for your viewing pleasure. And I'm going to start out something new today. It's to pay or stay away. I'm going to go with some top options at each position, whether or not I'm going to be paying for them, staying away, or what have you. So try to give a little bit of insight there towards what I'm playing and who I think is worth paying up for today as well. So go ahead and kick things off as I usually do with the point guard position. And your obvious top option, maybe not price considered, but top option, Russell Westbrook. $13,300 is an astronomical price. I mean, if you're an MLB DFSer, this is equivalent to Clayton Kershaw against the Padres in Petco. I mean, it's a ridiculously high price tag, but it's very warranted. I mean, last few games, 69, 62, 86, 68, and 74 fantasy points. So I do think you need to have yourself some exposure. I do not think he's necessary in cash games. Just at that price, it kind of hurts your other positions, and there's not a ton of value to be found right now for my end. So I do think you need to have some Russell Westbrook, but I don't think he's a must in your cash games. My to pay or stay away at point guard is going to be Chris Paul. $10,500. I mentioned this on the other podcast. He didn't look himself on Monday. He was limping after the game. Only took 6 shots, hit 1. Yeah, the assists were there with 15, but you need a lot more than that to pay off this price tag. And if Chris Paul is taking 6 shots, doesn't matter to me how many assists he's dishing out. I think that is a stay away for me. My number 2 option at point guard, and rightfully so, is Stephen Curry. $10,300. He's always good. Not always great for his price tag, but last game, phenomenal. 54.7 fantasy points. The few games before that, much less than paying off his tag. So I think if you're going to pay up, if you're looking for a safe option outside of Russell Westbrook, I think Curry's your man. Also don't think he's necessary in cash games, but I wouldn't blame you if you went there. Some other guys right around this price tag. You've got Damian Lillard, not in a great matchup. I think he's a little pricey for me, $8,700. Ricky Rubio, I love this spot for Ricky Rubio. $8,200. Phoenix, fast-paced game. Eric Bledsoe, not a great defender. Brandon Knight is out. So not a whole lot of resistance on the other end there. So I do like Ricky Rubio quite a bit here. $8,200 I think is a fair price. He's got a decent amount of upside there still. Kemba Walker's back tonight. Supposed to have limited minutes. We don't know exactly how many yet. It's kind of speculation at this point. So that makes him and Mo Williams easy avoids for me. I think Mo Williams could still be fine. $7,400, but I don't know how many minutes he's going to lose. I think there's other options. I don't think that's a route that I'll be taking. You've got Jeff Teague playing well, going up against Denver, $7,100. I think he's a fine play. Going down a little bit further, Goran Dragic says he's going to play tonight. Dwayne Wade's still a game-time decision, so Goran Dragic, a great play for me at $6,600 against Darren Williams, Jarrett Jack, and the Nets. I like him a great deal. Think he's a nice cash game play. Can't imagine he'd be coming back if he's not healthy, so I like him a bit. Mike Conley, right around that price at $6,400, I think is a fine cash game option. Moving down a little bit further, not a whole lot else to see here. I think Ray McCallum's a fine punt at $4,500 if you need a cash game filler, 20 to 25 fantasy points, somewhere in there. Outside of that, I'm not digging any deeper here. We'll see Dwayne Wade's status, see if you really want to risk any of these Miami Heat players, but that's not for me tonight on a 10-game slate. I'll be avoiding that as much as I can outside of Goran Dragic. Moving over to shooting guard, my to pay or stay away is Victor Oladipo. $8,000. I think it's a little bit pricey for me. A tough matchup, slow pace. He does thrive in fast-paced games. I don't see him paying off his tag and doing much more here value-wise. I think he could get 35 to 40 fantasy points, but I think that's about his ceiling in this matchup. So that's a stay away for me. Obvious top option here, James Harden, $11,300. Very, very pricey, but he has the highest upside of anyone not named Russell Westbrook on this slate and just about any other slate. So if you're looking for James Harden, if you're looking at him, if he goes off for 60 to 65, I mean, it's the Russell Westbrook effect there. You don't have him. You're behind big time in tournaments and or cash games. I think you'll probably see more Harden than Westbrook in cash games tonight just due to the price. I mean, you can get Harden for $2,000 cheaper. Quite possible they have similar outputs today. So got to choose between the two. I'm going Harden in cash games. I think you need to have exposure to both in tournaments. A little bit cheaper, obviously not touching Dwayne Wade, even if he goes. Supposedly he has an illness. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe that's just a reason why he might not sit tonight. I think he's just old, needs some rest. So that's obviously an easy avoid for me. Do like Giannis Antetokounmpo. He does fine in these slow-paced games. He's not scoring dependent to pay off his tag. 7,000 is a little expensive, but we saw the one day with a discount. We talked about him last time. He was 6,100, jumped right back up after a huge performance of 51 fantasy points. So he's a guy that can do it all. I like him a great deal. You know he's going to play a lot of minutes. He's a fine cash game play. Again, Kevin Martin's an upside guy at 6,400. Very dependent on scoring, though, so not a guy that I'll be targeting much. JJ Redick in a fine spot. His price really creeping up, but with Chris Paul being less than 100%, it seems, I think JJ Redick should see some more shots as well. Fine cash game play there. Not a ton of upside for a tournament, I wouldn't anticipate, but he should see a pretty decent ownership percentage tonight. Moving down a little bit further, see a whole bunch of no thanks for me. I like Gary Neal in the tournament. Not seeing a lot of minutes, 4,300, but takes a lot of shots. In just 21 minutes each of the last two games, he's taken 10 and 11 shots. So you like that. When he comes in, he's shooting. Pretty much the only scoring option in that second unit for Minnesota. Going a little bit cheaper there. I do like Austin Rivers quite a bit. Once again, the Chris Paul effect. Should be some more shots to go around. He's obviously coming off the bench, but Clippers 7-point underdogs in this one. If Chris Paul is actually limited like he was on Monday, they're going to struggle to keep this one close. And as crazy as that sounds, I do think that this game could get out of hand if Russell Westbrook has a big game. Chris Paul, with that hurt ankle, probably going to struggle on defense against Russell Westbrook despite his defensive prowess if he's not 100%. So do like Austin Rivers as a punt. I think he's the only viable option that low. 3,900 is a great price. I'll be getting him in quite a few of my lineups. Not digging any deeper than that. Moving over to small forward. To pay or stay away. Once again, this is going to be Rudy Gay, 8,300. It is a tough matchup for him against Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, so not a guy I'm going to be investing in much tonight. You know he does have significant upside. So, once again, multiple tournament lineups. Yeah, get yourself some exposure. Don't think he's necessary for cash games. That's a stay away for me for the most part. Draymond Green, I like a great deal, but 8,200 is a little bit pricey. Looking at Andrew Wiggins, his price is fine, but he's pretty much a cash game. I mean, we haven't seen him with a big game in quite a while here. I mean, you see a 37-point fantasy point game against Houston 8 games ago. But outside of that, he's been mid to upper 20s, low 30s. Not a whole lot of value to be had there with Andrew Wiggins. Not a lot of upside. I think he's a fine cash game play. Tobias Harris, 6,500. You pretty much know you're getting 25 to 30 from him. I think he's a solid play as well. I like Nicholas Batum at 6,200. But if you needed to save a little bit, you got a similar player in Trevor Ariza. Not quite as high of a ceiling there, but definitely a nice floor for your cash game. So you go either route there. Looking at some other guys here. I'm not a huge fan of Luol Deng here. He's getting minutes, but if Dwayne Wade sits, maybe he gets a couple extra shots, I think he'd be fine for a tournament. But 6,100, I would rather go with a guy like Damari Carroll, 5,700. Great matchup against Denver. He's a guy who kind of does it all. He gets minutes, he gets steals, he rebounds the ball fairly well for a small forward. So, and well rested. Sat out 2 games ago, just 29 minutes last game, 32 fantasy points. It's a little bit of an anomaly. He's not much of a point per minute guy, but pretty safe option there if you're going around that middle range. Going down a little bit further, I already mentioned Trevor Ariza. Danilo Gallinari is a fine cash game play at 5,200. Luke Richard Mbamute at 5,200. Sorry if I messed up your name there. Let me know if someone knows a better pronunciation out there. But he's been playing well recently. You look at his last 6 games, 5 of those 6 over 21 fantasy points with a 41 and a 29 mixed in there. So he's a guy who has some decent upside. He's been playing upper 20s, nearly 30 minutes a game. Pretty dependent on scoring. So probably not a guy I'd play in my cash games. Definitely a risky play, but I think he's a fine option if you want to differentiate a little bit there. Going down a little bit further, you've got a guy like Matt Barnes who could see a couple extra shots with Chris Paul maybe being hobbled. And again, this is me speculating, but I can't imagine he's just completely healthy after 2 games. Was limping 2 days ago. Really, really tough to hold your own with Russell Westbrook, no matter what. So Matt Barnes, probably a pretty solid cash game play. Should see 30 to 35 minutes. Not a huge ceiling, but I think he's a guy that's not going to kill your team. I'm not going on the Michael Beasley train here tonight unless we hear news that everyone's out. He's seeing minutes, but just not a whole ton of upside. I mean, 17 fantasy points in 32 minutes last game. Did have 31 and 38 the game before, but everyone was sitting, so I wouldn't blame you for that. But I think on a 10-game slate, he's not a guy that I'm going to be aggressively targeting. My to pay or stay away for power forward, LaMarcus Aldridge. I do think he's in a great spot. I do think he could have himself a nice 40, 45 point fantasy night. However, I think there's some better options cheaper. I think he is a stay away for me outside of maybe a single bullet in a tournament. He does have that upside, but at 9,400, pretty prohibitive, especially because you're going to need to get some studs in your lineup. I prefer some guys like James Harden, Steph Curry, guys like that. Maybe DeMarcus Cousins. We'll get to that in a minute, but don't think LaMarcus Aldridge is necessary tonight. Going down a little bit further, Pau Gasol, love the matchup. He should dominate down low, but at 9,100 against Philly, that game probably should be out of hand before too long, so I don't know that he's a necessity either. Greg Monroe, my favorite play here, power forward, just a ridiculously high floor for Monroe. Pretty much 35 to 45 fantasy points each and every night right now. At 8,100, he did play last night. I'm not concerned about that. Golden State not great against the 4. If you see some Draymond Green, he'll have a huge size advantage. If you see some David Lee, then he's going to eat because David Lee is a terrible defender. So do like Greg Monroe quite a bit. Zach Randolph at 8K, a little bit pricey for me. I love some Paul Millsap at 7,400 against Denver here. Think he's in a great spot, a fine cheap price for him. You like to think maybe Denver can keep this one close on the road. You hope they do for his sake. Nerlens Noel at 7,300, definitely a nice floor for him as well. I think I'd rather go Millsap, but maybe Noel in a tournament, more upside there. Kenneth Faried at 6,400, guy I like quite a bit. You don't love the matchup, but he's getting solid minutes. He's producing, and Atlanta's not a huge front court, so they're solid defenders, okay rebounders, but I don't mind the matchup there for Kenneth Faried. On paper, it seems a lot tougher than I think it really will be. Moving down a little bit further, Nikola Mirotic obviously in play, especially with the potential that Chicago blows out the Sixers. 5,700 is still a fair price. He's got great upside. I like him much more here on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings, where he's over 6,000. Moving down a little bit cheaper, I'm going to keep scrolling, and I'm not going to play anyone else. No thanks for the cheap power forwards. That's about the cutoff line for me tonight, unless something changes. We're going to move on to center now, where the obvious top option here, DeMarcus Cousins, 10,600. Took just 9 shots in his last game against Atlanta. Tough matchup. Still managed almost 40 fantasy points. We know the ceiling this guy has. And at a center position, if he has 50 to 55 fantasy points in a matchup with Al Jefferson, who is an offensively minded player, you could be behind very quickly. So get yourself some exposure to DeMarcus Cousins. I'm going to go with him as my to play or stay away, and I'm saying play. Play DeMarcus Cousins. Only played 29 minutes in the last game. 32 minutes in the last game. And I think he's plenty rested. Of his last 5 games, he has 22, 29, 39, 35, and 32 minutes. So he's used to playing big minutes, but he hasn't played a ton of minutes recently. I like him a lot. He's the obvious top option. DeAndre Jordan, a little bit too much for me at 9,600. No thanks. Al Jefferson, I think, is a fine play at 8,500, but I don't think he's necessary. Don't forget Hassan Whiteside, suspended, will not play tonight. So that opens up my next play, my favorite play at the position, Brook Lopez, 6,900 against a Whitesideless Miami Heat team. He's been playing great basketball, 37, 38, and 32 points in his last 3 games, all in tough matchups. Phoenix, Utah, New Orleans, back in the starting lineup. Like him a great deal. Should see 30-plus minutes tonight. And Chris Anderson, a fine defender, isn't going to play a ton of minutes. Who really knows who Miami Heat puts in there at the 5 now tonight in this scenario? So I like him a ton tonight at that price. Marcus All, a great cash game play at 7,700. And if you want to go really cheap, only guy I'm really looking at here is Robin Lopez, playing upper 20s to low 30s in minutes here. And he's got a pretty safe floor, right around 20 points. Not much of a ceiling, maybe around 30 points. But if you get 25 points out of Robin Lopez at 5,100, then he's definitely done his job for you. I think he's an okay cash game play. And you can look at Alex Len. Kind of unpredictable. Has seen some foul trouble. Saw big minutes, then saw his minutes come down. So Very risky guy, not a cash game play, but an okay play in a tournament at 4,800 against a weak front line in Minnesota there. So I think he is certainly in play. Check out some great content we have at dailyfantasycafe.com. We've got some great NBA content. We've got some MLB content coming out for the season coming up very soon here. So thank you for hanging out with me. I will see you all again tomorrow.